Should be recording. Hi, this is Shannon here and
Elena.
So we're going to go over kind of where we have been and where we're going with our collaborative teamwork that we've been doing this year. So we have identified a priority standard for writing. We have made a common formative assessment rubric that you should be using with your students in class, and being able to provide them constructive feedback.
Mm-hmm.
Is that it, Elena?
Yeah. So what we wanted to do is just talk about, now that we're done with the writing process and that you're being able to implement those rubrics in your classroom with students, we wanted to say, now that we're going to move on to content standards, where have we been with the PLC process, and go back over the big picture is kind of an overview, where we're headed, and then a reminder of kind of the why behind all of this work. So we wanted to start with the PLC questions that we had shared with you, and these are from Rick Dufour, but these are the guiding work of collaborative teams. So remember, the whole process in collaborative teams really fits into this long-range plan of these 4 questions. So the first one, what do we want students to learn? That's where we were looking at the writing standards. What writing standards are we saying are non-negotiable that we want to make sure that our students are proficient at? That's what we unpacked, and then we wrote the formative assessment rubrics for that, which would be question 2. Next steps, as you're using this with students, it would help you answer questions 3 and 4. So what am I going to do for the students who aren't proficient in writing, and how am I going to move them on that rubric? Or what am I going to do for the students who already know it, and how can I extend that learning for them? So the big picture and the long-range plan really fits into those 4 questions. We're going to continue to work through those now for your content area standards. So Rick Dufour provides some information and the research, and I think it just helped us understand too, why is it so important that we answer question 1 and create a guaranteed and viable curriculum, and what does that actually mean for educators? So we wanted to go ahead and share a 3-minute clip with you about what Rick Dufour says about why we need to create a guaranteed and viable curriculum.
One of the things we said is we want every team to create a guaranteed and viable curriculum unit by unit. We want this to happen in every school and every team. But what does that mean, a guaranteed and viable curriculum? The research tells us if we can do this, it's going to have a very positive impact on student achievement. So on page 171, you've got all these researchers telling us this. They may have different terminology, but they're all saying the same thing. Any school that says they want to help all kids learn should have a process in place to ensure that every teacher can answer the question, learn what? Unit by unit. Now, we're trying to do this across the United States in 45 states, where we've got the most comprehensive effort ever in the history of the United States to create a guaranteed curriculum, the Common Core, right? Now, how will districts go about implementing the Common Core? Some districts will simply give each teacher a copy of the Common Core standards for their grade level, and they tell them go teach it. Now, they believe, or they don't really believe, but they pretend that A, people will read it, B, they'll interpret the standards in the same way, C, they'll assign the same priority to the standards, spend the same amount of time on each standard, and D, they have the skills to teach all of those standards. Now, we know that's not true, but we pretend it's true, and we pretend that we satisfy ourselves with the illusion of this guaranteed curriculum because everybody has the same document, whether it's the Common Core or the Texas State Standards. We pretend that gives us a guaranteed curriculum. We know it doesn't, but or there are other districts that are going the other way. They're saying we will actually tell you what you will teach on any given day. If it's Tuesday, you've got to be on page 14, and we will script the lesson for you. So they will tell you what to teach, when to teach, and these are the words you say when you teach it. Now, the first district is too loose. The second district is too tight. Neither one gives you a guaranteed curriculum. It would be like me giving you my PowerPoint last night for this keynote saying, I can't make it tomorrow. You give my keynote. Here's the PowerPoint. Go do it. Now, you won't know what's in the PowerPoint. You won't be committed to the PowerPoint. And God forbid somebody asks you a question about the PowerPoint, right? So the point here is that neither of those approaches is going to create a guaranteed and viable curriculum. The person who gave us this term is Bob Marzano. And he was very upset that people were misinterpreting what a guaranteed curriculum means. And so in his latest book, it's called Leaders of Learning. I think it's the best book he's ever written, perhaps because he wrote it with my favorite author, me. And in that book, he clarifies that the only way you can have a guaranteed curriculum is that when the teachers who are called upon to implement the curriculum come together and they study it, they agree on priorities within the curriculum, they translate those priorities into student-friendly language, they establish a timeline for when they're going to teach the different skills in this unit. Here's how long we're going to teach. Here are the 2 skills we're going to teach. And they commit to one another. I promise I will teach the skill. Do we all promise? The only guarantee that matters in a guaranteed curriculum is the guarantee of the teachers. The state can't guarantee a curriculum. The Common Core can't. Your district can't. Your principal can't. But you can. And teachers have to come together and establish a guaranteed curriculum.
Okay, so we thought that that really helped understand the why. Why do we do this? So Rick Dufour has really come up with this process. It has been supported through John Hattie's research with over 50,000 studies that have taken place with hundreds of thousands of students, and determined that identifying priority standards is absolutely necessary to help students achieve at high levels. Other experts that have done this work would be Bob Marzano, Austin Buffum, Luis Cruz, Rick Dufour, and Mike Matos. So there's a lot of research backing this process.
So you're not just making us do this to be mean?
Oh, well, no. Thanks. No, I'm not nearly good enough to be able to come up with all of this information myself. Trust me. And you know, I think he makes a good point on there's no standards police out there. There's no one coming from the Department of Ed into your classroom saying, "Are you teaching the standards?" It's that we as educators are making sure that our students have access to those standards, and that if they aren't getting those priority standards, that we're going to intervene. And it's that commitment, it's that promise. I heard Mike Matos the other week, and he talked about, rather than calling them priority standards or power standards, he referred to them as promise standards, which I thought was really interesting. And he said, these are the standards we promise students and parents that the students will master before they leave my class. And I thought that that was a really powerful statement. So going back to kind of the big picture and talking about those 4 questions, this is the process that you guys had gone through with looking at the writing standards. So you had identified the priority standards using the real criteria, which would be readiness, endurance, assessed, and leveraged. I think the document you might have used looks like this. And so you can use this document. I just provided kind of a snippet of that, of the main ideas. And then the priority standards document that I've created that works well for me to think through this process is I list the number of the standard here, and then I just exit where if it meets that criteria. So then by the time I'm looking at all my standards, let's say for a US history course, I can determine, okay, what's, you know, maybe the 3 to 5 priority standards based on that filtering criteria when it meets all 4 of those, or at least 3. So you did that with writing. Now you're going to be doing it with your content standards. Yes, we're finally getting there, right? So the next step that you did once you identified your priority standards, you unpacked them. So I just have a quick example of a standard that I've used in social studies. And this would be one of the inquiry standards in social studies, which I thought would be fairly cross-curricular. And it talks about having students construct explanations. So you can see here that I unpacked it. I created the learning targets from my unpacking. And then the next step that you guys did was create your formative assessment rubric for that learning target that determined what would proficiency look like for my students. So ideally, you would be bringing this rubric back, using it with students, and then providing very specific academic feedback to students and figuring out where do I need to intervene or where do I need to provide extensions in my classroom. After that, we wanted to talk about what is going to be kind of the next goal when you're working on your content standards. So Shannon and I developed a student work protocol or student work guide
Yes.
that we're going to be using. So Shannon, do you want to talk a little bit about what the purpose of this is?
Well, so we've been doing all of this work, beating our heads against the wall, trying to unpack standards and get these rubrics all ready to go. And really, we need to tie that all together. How are we going to use this in our classroom to guide student learning? Because that's the goal, right?
Yes.
We
Yep.
want all kids to learn at high levels. So this work that we've been doing isn't just going to sit on your shelf or in your computer. We're actually going to use it to drive our instruction.
So the way that this protocol works is a teacher will be bringing back student work from the rubric. So here, if I would just use an example, let's say in my classroom, I had students construct an explanation based on a specific content area that we were working on. And so when I'm going to bring back that student work to make it a little bit more manageable, I'm going to recommend teachers start with bringing back a 6-pack of student work. It could be 6 random students' work. It could be 2 that are fairly low, 2 in the middle, 2 that are high. But 6 makes it much more manageable than trying to bring back 25 at this point. And when you think about student work, remember, we're talking about your formative assessment rubric. So it might be an explanation on an exit ticket. It might be part of a more formal assessment, but it needs to be a task where the student's thinking was made visible. So it would need to be something that they wrote or something that they recorded or a presentation that they made that you could assess through this rubric and that the other teachers could help give feedback on that student work. So the way that this process will work, and all of you will have a copy of this, is really the presenting teacher is just going to share the student work, talk about the skills that they were looking for, where did this fall in the unit, what's the learning target, and what's the rubric that they were using to provide student feedback. The times are an estimate. We tried to estimate what we thought it would take, but we'll keep updating this as we get feedback from you guys on the protocol. Then each member is going to be looking at the student work in comparison to the rubric, writing down what they notice about the student work, keeping judgments out of it, and the evidence that they're using to determine the proficiency of the student work. The team can then ask the presenter clarifying questions, and the group will actually have a discussion about the student work and why what the students can do matters. So providing some feedback to the teacher. Reflections from the presenter will then take place, and the team together collaboratively can talk about what does next steps need to be. If all 6 students got it, great. So how are we going to provide an extension in the class? If most of the students didn't get the skill yet, what could be a whole group maybe intervention that you needed to do in the class? What could be a quick small group activity that you could do to progress their learning? Or maybe there's just one student that needs a little bit of extra support that you could do that fairly simply in your classroom, and you could already have that planned during collaborative teaming. The last step of this is then during the next collaborative team meeting, you're just taking a few minutes to talk to your team about, hey, this is what I ended up doing in my classroom. This is what worked. Maybe this is what didn't. Maybe you still need a little bit of help on that. That's what your team is for. So you're collaborating around that. Then your team is also getting ideas and benefiting from this process because these kids are all of our kids. So we really want to make sure that we're providing feedback to those teachers and helping them brainstorm what can we do next.
Yes.
So ultimately, you think, okay, so we're adding this student work protocol. When are we going to get to this? So we want to give you time and make sure that you can dive into your content standards. We recommend you start with one course. So choose a course maybe that meets the most kids or that you feel most confident with, and start identifying the priority standards using the real criteria. And Mr. Marks has recommended that we bring back student work based on one of your content area learning targets and your rubric by December 12th.
And so this is something that you'll need to teach in your classroom. So pick something that you're already doing and go ahead and go through the unpacking process and get your rubric around. This doesn't really have to be in addition to what you do. It's what you're already doing in the classroom.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's an excellent point. So we're going to be bringing back that 6-pack of student work on December 12th with this priority standard, the learning target, and the rubric, and then the student work itself. And again, we're not looking for like a whole research paper or something like that. This is a formative assessment. It's a dipstick check that you can go back to your classroom and modify your instruction based on the student needs.
Yes.
So it might be an exit ticket. It doesn't have to be something extravagant. It's just how are the students making their thinking visible. So hopefully that provided direction. Remember, we reviewed the 4 PLC questions, and that's really our long range plan. So how are we meeting the needs of students within our collaborative teams? Is there anything else you'd like to add?
Awesome. I think we've got it. Thanks for listening, guys.
Awesome. Keep up the great work. Thank you.